hand, but help came swiftly, for Bard at once had speedy messengers sent up the river to the forest to ask the aid of the king of the elves of the wood, and these messengers had found a host already on the move, although it was then only the third day after the fall of Smaug. The elven king had received news from his own folk messengers, and from the birds that loved his folk, and already knew much about what had happened. Very great indeed was the commotion among all things with wings that dwelt on the borders of the desolation of the dragon. The air was filled with circling flocks, and their swift-flying messengers flew here and there across the sky. Above the borders of the forest there was whistling, crying, and piping. Far over Mirkwood tidings spread, "Smaug is dead!" Leaves rustled and started, ears were lifted. Even before the Elven King rode forth, the news had passed west right to the pine woods of the Misty Mountains. Beorn had heard it in his wooden house, and the goblins were at council in their caves.
"That will be the last we shall hear of Thorin Oakenshield, I fear," said the king. "He would have done better to have remained my guest. It is an ill wind all the same," he added, "that blows no one any good."
For he too had not forgotten the legend of the wealth of Tror. So it was that Bard's messengers found him now marching with many spearmen and bowmen, and crows were gathered thick above him, for they thought that war was awakening again, such as had not been seen in those parts for a long age. But the king, when he received the prayers of Bard, had pity, for he was the lord of a good and kindly people. So turning his march, which had at first been directed towards the mountain, he hastened now down towards the river to the long lake. He had not boats or rafts enough for his host, and they were forced to go slower way by foot, but great store of goods he sent already by water. Still, elves are light-footed, and though they were not in these days much used to the marshes and the treacherous lands between the forest and the lake, their going was swift. Only 5 days after the death of the dragon, they came upon the shores and looked on the ruins of the town. Their welcome was good, as may be expected, and the men of the master were all ready to make any bargain for the future in return for the Elven King's aid. Their plans were soon made. With the women and the children, the old and the unfit, the master remained behind, and with him were some men of crafts and many skilled elves, and they busied themselves felling trees and collecting the timber they sent down from the forest. Then they set about raising many huts by the shore against the oncoming winter, and also under the master's direction they began to planning of a new town, designed more fair and large even than before, but not in the same place. They removed northward, higher up the shore, for ever after they had a dread of the water where the dragon lay. He would never again return to his golden bed, but was stretched cold as stone, twisted upon the floor of the shallows. There, for ages, his huge bones could be seen in calm weather amid the ruined piles of the old town. But few dared to cross that cursed spot, and none dared to dive into the shivering water, or recover the precious stones that fell from his rotting carcass. But all the men of arms who were still able, and most of the Elven King's array, got ready to march north to the mountain. It was thus that in 11 days from the ruin of the town, the head of their host passed the rock gates at the end of the lake and came into the desolate lands. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. The Gathering of the Clouds. Now we will return to Bilbo and the dwarves. All night one of them had watched, but when morning came they had not heard or seen any sign of danger, but ever more thickly the birds were gathering. Their companies came flying in from the south, and the crows that still lived on the mountain, there was wheeling and crying unceasingly above. "Something strange is happening," said Thorin. "The time has gone for the autumn wanderings, and these are birds that dwell always in the land. There are starlings and flocks of finches, and far off there are many carrion birds, as if a battle were afoot. Suddenly Bilbo pointed. "There's that old thrush again," he cried. "He seems to have escaped when Smaug crashed and smashed the mountainside, but I don't suppose the snails have." Sure enough, the old thrush was there, and as Bilbo pointed, he flew towards them and perched on a stone nearby. Then he fluttered his wings and sang. Then he cocked his head to one side as if to listen, and again he sang, and again he listened. "I believe he's trying to tell us something," said Balin, "but I cannot follow the speech of such birds. It's very quick and difficult. Can you make it out, Baggins?" Not very well," said Bilbo. As a matter of fact, he could make nothing of it at all. "But the old fellow, he seems quite excited." "I only wish he was a raven," said Balin. "I thought you didn't like them. You seemed very shy of them when we came this way before." No, those were crows, and nasty, suspicious-looking creatures at that, and rude as well. You must have heard the ugly names they were calling after us. But the ravens are different. There used to be great friendship between them and the people of Thror, and they often brought us secret news, and were rewarded with such bright things as they coveted and hide in their dwellings. They live many a year, and their memories are long, and they hand on the wisdom to their children. I knew many among the ravens of the rocks when I was a dwarf lad. This very height was once named Ravenhill, because there was a wise and famous pair, old Cark and his wife, that lived here above the guard chambers. But I don't suppose that any of the ancient breed linger here now." No sooner had he finished speaking that the old thrush gave a loud call and immediately flew away. "We may not understand him, but the old bird understands us, I am sure," said Balin. "Keep watch now and see what happens." Before long there was a fluttering of wings, and back came the old thrush, and with him a most decrepit old bird. He was getting blind. He could hardly fly, and the top of his head was bald. He was an aged raven of great size. He alighted stiffly on the ground before them, slowly flapped his wings, and bobbed toward Thorin.
"Rah! O Thorin, son of Thrain, and Balin, son of Fundin," he croaked,
and Bilbo could understand what he said, for he used ordinary language and not bird speech.
"I am a Roak, son of Cark. Cark is dead, but he was well known to you once. It is 100 years and 350 since I came out of the egg, but I do not forget what my father told me. Now I am the chief, the great ravens of the mountain. We are few, but we remember still the king that was of old. Most of my people are abroad, for there are great tidings in the south. Some are tidings to joy of you, and some you will think not so good. Behold, the birds are gathering back again to the mountain and to dale from south and east and west. For word has gone out that Smaug is dead."
"Dead? Dead?" shouted the dwarves. "Dead? Then we have all been in needless fear, and the treasure is ours." They all sprang up and began to caper about for joy.
"Yes, dead,"
said Roak.
"The thrush, may his feathers never fall, saw him die, and we may trust his words. He saw him fall in battle with the men of Esgaroth the third night back from now at the rising of the moon."
It was some time before Thorin could bring the dwarfs to be silent and to listen to the raven's news. At length, when he had told all the tale of the battle, he went on.
"So much for joy, Thorin Oakenshield. You may go back to your halls in safety. All the treasure is yours for the moment, but many are gathering hither beside the birds. The news of the death of the Guardian has already gone far and wide, and the legend of the wealth of Thror was not lost in the telling during many years. Many are eager to share in the spoil. Already a host of elves is on the way, and carrion birds are with them, hoping for battle and slaughter. By the lake men murmur that the sorrows are due to the dwarfs, for they are homeless, and many have died, and Smaug has destroyed their town. They too think to find amends with your treasure, whether you are alive or dead. Your wisdom must decide your course, but 13 are so small a remnant of the great folk of Durin that once dwelt here and now are scattered far. If you will listen to my counsel, you will not trust the master of the lake men, but rather him who shot the dragon with his bow. Bard is he of the race of Dale, of the line of Girion. He is a grim man, but true. We would see peace once more between the dwarfs and the men and the elves after the long desolation, but it may cost you your dear in gold. I have spoken.
Then Thorin burst forth in anger. Our thanks, Roak, Cark's son. You and your people shall not be forgotten, but none of our gold shall thieves take or violent carry off while we are alive. If you would earn our thanks still more, bring us news of any that draw near. Also, I beg of you, if any of you are still young and strong of wing, that you would send messengers to our kin in the mountains of the north, both west from here and east, and tell them of our plight. But go specially to my cousin, Dane, in the Iron Hills, for he has many people well armed and dwells nearest to this place. Bid him hasten.
I will not say if this counsel be good or bad,
croaked Roak.
But I will say what can be done.
Then off he slowly flew. Back now to the mountain, cried Thorin. We have little time to lose. And little food to use, cried Bilbo, always practical on such points. In any case, he felt that the adventure was, properly speaking, over with the death of the dragon, in which he was much mistaken, and he would have given most of his share of the profits for the peaceful winding up of these affairs. Back to the mountain, cried the dwarves, as if they had not heard him. So back he had to go with them. As you have heard some of the events already, you will see that the dwarves still had some days before them. They explored the caverns once more and found, as they expected, that only the front gate remained open. All the other gates, except of course the small secret door, had long ago been broken and blocked by Smaug, and no sign of them remained. So now they began to labour hard in fortifying the main entrance, and in making a new path that led from it. Tools were to be found in plenty, that the miners and quarriers and builders of old had used, and at such work the dwarves were very skilled. As they worked, the ravens brought them constant tidings. In this way they learnt that the Elven King had turned aside to the lake, and they still had a breathing space. Better still, they heard that 3 of their ponies had escaped, and were wandering wild far down the banks of the running river, not far from where the rest of their stores had been left. So while the others went on with their work, Philly and Killy were sent, guided by a raven, to find the ponies and bring back all they could. They were 4 days gone, and by that time they knew that the joined armies of the Lakemen and the Elves were hurrying towards the mountain. But now their hopes were higher, for they had food for some weeks with care, chiefly cram, of course, and they were very tired of it, but cram is much better than nothing. And already the gate was blocked with a wall of squared stone laid dry, but very thick and high across the opening. There were holes in the wall through which you could see, or shoot, but no entrance. They climbed in or out with ladders or hauled stuff up on ropes. For the issuing of the stream they contrived a low, small arch under the new wall, but near the entrance they had so altered the narrow bed with a wide pool stretching from the mountain wall to the head of the fall over which the stream went toward Dale. Approach to the gate was now only possible, without swimming, along a narrow ledge of the cliff, to the right as one looked outward from the wall. The ponies they had brought only to the head of the steps above the old bridge, and unloaded them where they had bidden them to return to their masters, and sent them back riderless to the south. There came a night when suddenly there were many lights as of fires and torches away south in Dale before them. "They have come," called Balin, "and their camp is very great. They must have come into the valley under the cover of dusk, under both banks of the river." That night the dwarfs slept little. The morning was still pale when they saw a company approaching. From behind their wall they watched them come up the valley's head and climb slowly up. Before long they could see that both men of the lake were armed as if for war,